come into a period of several months where the Israel Academy celebrates 50 years since its founding. And I'm happy, the more I mention that, the happier I am, because it means that we are having important events to mark this particular milestone, and this is certainly one of them, the conference here today. Don't mistake quantity for quality. There are not very many of us here, but I'm sure the proceedings will prove very, very much worthwhile. I just want to recite the two events in 1959 and 60 that led to the establishment of the Israel Academy. In December of 1959, a group of scholars and scientists that were to become the Academy convened under the chairmanship of Professor Martin Buber, and later on in February of 1960, the Academy itself convened for its first plenary session under the chairmanship of the then Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, and it was on that occasion that the first officers of the Academy were elected, and the first president was indeed Martin Buber, and the first vice president was Professor Aaron Katzir. The reason I the reason I go into this specific detail is that, in fact, the subject of the contribution and writings of Martin Buber is the first, as far as I know, project of cooperation between the Berlin-Brandenburg Academy and the Israel Academy, and I'm happy to see the proliferation of this kind of cooperation, part of which is this conference here today. But I think it was quite a few years ago, 15 or 20 years ago, that the two academies first got together and decided to work together on publishing a scientific version of the writings of Professor Martin Buber, and as I said, he was indeed the first president of this academy. If we look at that, it is indeed a very complicated complex, if I can use these words. I'm not an expert, I'm here to learn, actually, but if you do look at, let's say, World War II, the most devastating conflagration in human history, probably, and certainly the most recent one in that category, the role of science was very much pronounced in the horrors of that war on both sides of the conflict. And this is very well known and needs no special mention. But less known than that is the other side, namely that before World War II was concluded, was over, President Roosevelt initiated the move that was designed to lead to implementation of the lessons learned in that war, the scientific lessons that were learned in this war, in the process of establishing peace. And in, I think it was the 14th of November 1944, which is just a few days after his election to the fourth and last term, President Roosevelt wrote to Professor Vannevar Bush, who was the head of the office the American Office of Science and Technology, and that office was responsible for all the developments during World War II that led to military applications and very major ones, as we know. And he wrote to him and saying that here you are, head of an office.
I also would like to welcome you to the first conference on the topic Science and War, Science and Peace, to be held in Jerusalem today and tomorrow. As it was stated before, this conference is organized by the two academies, and I'm pleased that it came to reality. We are, for the Berlin side, honored and pleased that this important conference is also part of the festivities affiliated to the 50th anniversary of the Israel Academy of Sciences and Humanities and its events making this important milestone. The Israel Academy of Science and Humanities and the Berlin-Brandenburg Academy of Science and Humanities, formerly the Prussian Academy, have joined hands in organizing a series of workshops and conferences on science and war, science and peace. The first preparatory meeting in this series took place last December at the Academy in Berlin. The topic of our conference, Science and War, is of high scientific, political, ethical and of social relevance. The issue is, as was mentioned before, highly complex because science and war, as well as their reciprocal relationship, have undergone fundamental change in recent history, and the rapid changes are still valid for today's scientific, political and also military situation. For this reason, a common multi- and transdisciplinary approach and integrated perspective are indispensable for this conference. It's the aim of this conference concept and of the two academies involved in this preparation to develop a long-term perspective in order to describe the basic changes and the complex relationship between science and war, science and peace. It has been a long-wanted desire to convene this eminent group of international scientists for such an extraordinary topic, which to my knowledge, so far, has only received pure historical considerations. With our activities, we can now enlarge our historical knowledge by observations recently made today. There is no doubt that the number and the importance of regional conflicts, whether we call it war or not, this is important for the Germans especially, is increasing currently and will probably do so in the future. Hence, we need, and this is our firm belief, to reflect on what these conflicts alter, to what extent they influence science, to what extent not only the topics but also our attitudes and our daily scientific life, do they influence the way how we do research, lecture and communicate our research results. And this is exactly the reason why I'm so anxious about this extraordinary working team composed of colleagues from Israel, United States and also Austria. But just a few humble questions of what Yehuda Elkanah has called a concerned scientist. Special thanks to the President of the Israel Academy of Science and Humanities, my friend Professor Mehan Yari, for hosting the first conference and for the always fruitful and productive scientific cooperation between our two academies. You should also know that we have a second approach when we talk about rationality, neuroscience and rationality, where we already had two conferences on this topic, just another piece of common work we are undertaking between the two academies. Special thanks to the Israeli chair of the working group, Professor Shulamit Volkov from Tel Aviv, and to our academy member, Mitchell Ash from the University of Vienna, for coordinating this important activity.